Please start. So thank you for this warm, hospitable start, and I would like to outline what I do, where I come from. So I am the head of the department on search and analysis of vulnerabilities at Kaspersky, and our department focuses on the following: the search for the zero-day vulnerabilities in different industrial systems, in software, in hardware, and this is the search for vulnerabilities in transport systems, in telecom. And within 9 years of our operations, our team defined and treated several hundreds of vulnerabilities, and some vendors are presented on the slide, those whom we helped. So today's story will focus on pin test, as it was brought by this headline session, but it is not the formal one. It is this real talk on pin test, and I will bring the real case, how the system of this real large automobile industry actor was attacked. So there was a malicious actor with having no knowledge on the systems and software hardware, and this area of attack was this publicly accessible services, and we also had a car, and we knew it was tuned to some informative system structure. And when we started the list of services and started agreeing upon them with the client, we found out the following. There were several web services that were owned by the subcontractor. And after a large discussion with the client, we decided to include the web services into the scope of our work. One of the web services was Wiki, and then issue tracker. When we started studying Wiki, then we were lucky enough. It was the injection of this zero-day vulnerability, and due to this injection, we started having this hash password that was not locked. I mean the account of the administrator, and we were lucky enough to come up with the password, and then after that we entered the stage of the star functionality, and we were able to come up with the random comments at the server. Therefore, we found out that from this server we had an access to the corporate network. So we had this direct view and vision of the domain, and the audit of the internal network of the client was not part of our scope. We did not deploy the attack into this direction. SQL was the part of the understanding, and we started having hash passwords, and we were lucky enough to come up with the passwords that we were able to use, and we used them. And we were lucky enough to have a chance to try them, and one of the passwords was the right one, and we started having access to issue tracker. And we were lucky enough to see that it was a lot of confidential information that was about the story of this automobile producer, a lot of information on the service, including those being the deep file with this catalog of the group of servers. So Linux-based operational systems offer services for configuration files, and they have files of the shadow files having hash passwords of the users of the system. Within several hash passwords, we were able to restore the passwords, but this deep file was quite old, and this opportunity to this chance to have the right passwords and be able to use them, it was not a big chance. So after this stage, we started having several accounts that we theoretically were able to use for the attacks on telematic structures. Further on, we started doing audit of the automobile. In fact, it's climate control panel, and it collected a lot of data, including job, position, and transferred it to the cloud of the automobile producer. This data transfer was offered by GSM network, and for such transition, the GSM modem was used. The access to the telematics and the services being part of that was limited from the internet, and the access was allowed only from some certain SIM cards. And we had automobiles and they needed SIM card, and therefore we obtained the access to the automobile infrastructure. When we started studying it, the first thing we defined was the following: the real-life picture was different from what was presented by the slide. The firewall was designed with some designs, and we were able to identify the servers that we expected to have this deep file, and we started checking the accounts. For a large amount of the accounts, the password was not good enough because it's been a long time and the users, they changed the passwords, and one of the accounts in the cluster hack cluster, it was good enough, and this account is used in the operational systems based on Red Hat for organization of several servers to bring them together as one cluster. This mistake message said that the password was correct, but we were not able to log in with this password. Why? Because the shell for this user was the dedicated shell that was not able to be used for interactive login. No logging has been. We were upset a little bit, but we proceeded with research, and we defined that for monitoring of servers was used Zabbix. So for each server, there was a Zabbix agent, and Zabbix server accesses the servers and collects the metrics and comes up with alerts and so on. So in order to limit the access to Zabbix agent, and due to this active server active, we can enter and access Zabbix and send the commands. This server active IP address 127.0.0.1, and we transfer the requests, and therefore the requests are able to be placed. And then it was sent with this user root, so it had the best priorities. After that, we started using the staff functionality, and we offered to organize the tunnel that would be connecting to Zabbix agent, and we started sending distant calls and requests to Zabbix agent, and the Zabbix agent thought it was the local request, and then it was handling and managing them. And after that, we started having access to this file system, and we were able to read the files, and through this history of one of the comments, we were able to find out the password. As it happened to be, it was the password to the account from another subcontractor being part of the system of this automobile producer. It was a privileged account, and the password to all the servers was the same. Therefore, we started having this access to all the service, to the telemetrics. After that, we started studying the interaction between the infrastructure and the block of telematics. And this list of commands understanding telematics, we found out the command for renovation of the software, and we understood the signature. The firmware was not something we were not able to control, so we started using that. And the rule for route making, there was this idea of having access to the gearbox. Therefore, we started influencing the physical safety and security of the driver and the passengers.
So a lot of people would say that we got lucky, and yes, there's a sense of luck over here in this audit. Yes, it was high, but the problems that led to the full complementation of the vehicles connected to the system, so they are quite typical for the industry. First of all, what helped us compromise the system, that the supplier had publicly accessible web service, and so they used the passwords, but not two-factor identification. So therefore, since the information was kept, and sensitive information was stored in open format, so we were able to get the hash, and simply because the password was quite easy to kind of figure it out, and because the manufacturer was not careful in wirefall categorization, so we had access, easy access, and because of the SSH server was configured by default, and allowing us to Zabbix agent was launched with maximum privilege, and we were able to compromise several servers. And because the password authentication for SSH was allowed, and they used the same password, so we were able to compromise the whole telemetrics infrastructure. And finally, but the most important factor is that the vehicles themselves, and they didn't have the check on the authenticity of the information coming in, so this led to the threats of physical safety. And what we recommended to this automaker, so a lot of measures have been already implemented, and first of all, of course, we recommended them to limit the access to the web servers, to hide them behind VPN, for example, and ideally isolate as the service, and so to have this two-way identification, and not to keep the data, sensitive data on the servers, and also organize to transfer and share this knowledge of the system, and do it on a regular basis, and to install the monitoring system. And also the manufacturer was recommended to limit access from telematics to the list of services, and so that those services would be at minimum way, and also in terms of the between the servers and exchange of information should be limited so that compromising one servers, the others would be safe. And we also recommended him to have very hard, let's say, passwords and connect SH forward actually enactment, and basically it's redundant in many cases, and to have minimum privileges for access, and also collect and transmit login for certain events. And the most challenging was to control the authenticity of those commands that get into the telematics. For example, if the malware user gets access, so they won't be able to physically destroy, let's say, the vehicle.